I want to start with a truly unsettling thought. Your gut feeling that a deepfake is fake doesn't matter. The deepfake has already won.
And that you, the learner, is really the existential crisis gripping the digital age.
Yeah.
It's not just about one bad piece of information or one viral lie.
Oh.
It's about a fundamental collapse in how we determine reality itself. Our very ability to agree on what is true is being fundamentally compromised.
Welcome back to the deep dive, customized specifically for you. Our mission today is, well, it's profound. Based on the rigorous material you shared, we are going to try and untangle a dramatic three-pronged crisis.
Right.
It's a crisis where the sheer speed, the volume, and frankly, the artifice of digital information are destabilizing everything from, the quiet structure of a high school classroom all the way to the absolute foundations of democracy.
We really are looking at a systemic breakdown of shared reality.
We are.
And the core tension here, that the philosophical gravity well that pulls everything in, is what the sources identify as epistemic uncertainty.
And let's break that down.
Forget the academic term for a moment. This is that nagging ancient human problem of how do we know what is real? How do we define truth? And that problem has now been exacerbated exponentially.
Why?
Because the very medium carrying the information, the internet, is compromised by generative AI. It's a crisis of knowledge itself, and it's been supercharged by speed.
So we have a massive task ahead to connect these dots. We're unpacking two enormous interconnected societal shifts that seem to spring from a single root cause.
That's right.
First, we have to understand the cognitive and cultural divide that is, well, it's shaking up our educational systems, this fundamental difference between so-called digital natives and digital immigrants.
And then second, we have to look at the collapse of societal trust, which is being fueled by this manufactured reality, namely deepfakes, and the resulting crisis in governance that follows.
And because we never leave you without a path forward, we'll wrap up by looking at a conceptual framework. A framework for how AI systems, which, let's face it, are currently part of the problem,
A big part of it.
might actually be engineered to manage this information overload. We're going to use lessons drawn from, of all places, the most efficient real-time data managers we use every day.
Navigation apps.
Navigation apps like Waze and Google Maps to show how data integrity can, maybe, be engineered back into the system.
And the ultimate villain here, it isn't a single technology. It's not even AI alone. It's what the sources are calling the digital singularity.
That's a term I think most of us associate with science fiction, the moment AI becomes sentient, that sort of thing.
Right. But here the source defines it much more immediately, much more practically. It's an event specifically, the rapid arrival and mass dissemination of digital technology.
So the internet, personal computers, smartphones.
Exactly. All of it happening in the late 20th century.
Yeah.
This event changed things so fundamentally, so quickly, that the authors say there is absolutely no going back.
It wasn't just another invention like the telephone or the TV. It was a complete paradigm shift.
A total shift. And the key consequence of this digital singularity, as you point out, is that it didn't just change our tools. It created a profound generational disconnect in how we even perceive information.
How we process it, how we value it.
All of it. It's not just a skill gap, you see. It's a cognitive gap.
And that's a crucial distinction.
It is.
Yeah.
If we don't first understand how the newest generation, the digital natives, are wired to process facts and stories, we can't possibly get a handle on why the societal and political systems, which were built by the previous generation, the digital immigrants, are now failing under the strain.
So you have to understand the mind shift before you can even attempt to fix the systems.
You have to.
Let's do it. That sets the stage perfectly for our first deep dive into this educational crisis. Okay, let's try to unpack this enormous cognitive chasm, starting with the digital native.
Right.
We're talking about today's students from kindergartner all the way through college. They're the first generations to grow up totally immersed, almost incubated, in this new technological environment. The source material defines them as the native speakers of the digital language, computers, video games, the internet. It's their first language.
And the metrics the sources lay out, they really make you pause and recognize just how different their mental landscape is compared to previous generations. This isn't just about owning a smartphone. It's so much deeper.
Right. Think about the statistic for the average college graduate today. The sources highlight the staggering disparity. They have spent fewer than 5,000 hours of their life engaging in traditional linear reading.
The kind of deep reading that, is required to build a complex, argument or historical understanding or to do any kind of deep textual analysis. 5,000 hours.
Now compare that with their exposure to the digital environment. The source material shows they've spent over 10,000 hours playing video games.
Double the time spent reading.
Double. And even more astonishingly, 20,000 hours watching TV, which is mostly fragmented, fast-paced content.
That is just. It's an enormous structural difference in how their brains were trained to consume and react to stimuli. We're talking about a completely different kind of cognitive conditioning.
The implication, which the sources highlight by referencing evolving understandings of cognitive science, is that this massive volume of digital interaction means these students, they think and process information fundamentally differently from their predecessors.
Their brains are literally wired differently.
It has changed the very pattern of attention and engagement.
The authors suggest that, regardless of the exact neuroplastic changes, their patterns of thinking have changed dramatically. If you spend 20,000 hours interacting with an environment that's built on speed, on responsiveness, on multiple input streams,
You're going to expect that everywhere.
you're going to prioritize those characteristics in every other learning environment you encounter. It becomes your baseline for what engaging even means.
So what does this new native language sound like? The sources list several key traits of the digital native mind. And to anyone who grew up in a print-based world, it often looks like a list of pedagogical defects.
Right, looks like a list of problems. But the source argues they're just different strengths.
Let's start with the most obvious one.
Speed. You have to start with speed. Digital natives are conditioned to receive information really fast. They're operating at what the sources call the twitch speed of video games and MTV.
Twitch speed, I like that.
That's perfect. So if you, as an instructor, take longer than a minute to get to the point, or if you require a slow, methodical introduction,
You've lost them.
you've lost them. That information is immediately perceived as tedious or worth irrelevant. Their system just rejects slowness.
And this speed is inextricably linked to another trait, a strong preference for parallel processing and multitasking.
Oh, absolutely. They don't typically prefer single, linear, step-by-step logic.
Yeah.
The kind of logic you need to, say, write a long paper or follow a Euclidean proof.
They're comfortable managing multiple streams of input coming in at once, monitoring several channels simultaneously.
Think about the implication of that for a moment. When a digital immigrant reads, they follow a single, clearly marked highway lane from point A to point B.
Very orderly.
Very.
Oh.
The digital native is driving on that highway while simultaneously fielding texts, monitoring 3 small news clips on separate screens, and calculating traffic patterns for the next city. The speed of synthesis is often impressive.
But something has to give.
But the ability to focus on one linear, deep thought is sometimes sacrificed. It's a trade-off.
They also have a clear bias, according to the sources, preferring graphics before text.
Yes, they opt for visual data charts, videos, infographics over purely written information. For them, text is often seen as a verification layer, not the primary means of communication. You see the graphic first, then you read the caption to confirm.
And perhaps the most disruptive trait for traditional education, they thrive on random access.
Like hypertext, like navigating the internet. They expect to be able to jump non-linearly to the relevant point.
This fundamentally disrupts the chronological argument-building structure of a traditional textbook or a historical narrative that insists on presenting evidence in a set sequence.
Right. They ask, why do I have to read the first 10 chapters if the answer I need is in chapter 11? And from their perspective, it's a perfectly logical question.
Finally, there's the demand for frequent rewards and instant gratification.
The gaming mindset.
Completely. They prefer systems that respond immediately, offering points, levels, or achievements, which is why they gravitate toward games over what digital immigrants might define as serious work.
And this isn't a moral failing, which I think is a key point the sources make. It's a hardwired expectation. It's been driven by thousands of hours of constant interaction with highly responsive, engaging digital environments.
Okay, so that's the native. Now let's get to the other side of this binary, the digital immigrants.
These are the instructors, the administrators, the policymakers, people who are not born into this world but adopted the technology later in life.
And even if they're very skilled with technology, they retain what the sources beautifully call an accent, a vestige of the pre-digital past.
The digital immigrant accent. It's such a perfect metaphor for those ingrained behaviors that justly imposed. They reveal an underlying linear or print-based thought process.
The source offers some fantastic relatable examples of this.
My absolute favorite example, and one that is still sadly prevalent, is the sheer number of people who still print out their email.
To read it or edit it, right?
With a pen?
With a pen.
Yeah.
And the source suggests that having a secretary print it out for you reveals an even thicker accent. That physical paper is a security blanket for their linear processing mind.
Or the boss who insists you physically come to their office to look at a website on their monitor.
Yes.
Rather than just sending the URL and trusting they can navigate it on their own. And of course, the enduring classic. The person who sends an email and immediately follows up with a phone call to ask, "Did you get my email?"
Guilty. I've done that.
We all have. It perfectly encapsulates that lack of full trust in the asynchronous digital communication system. You default back to the old, reliable, but much slower analog method.
The crisis, though, is that this accent is a serious educational roadblock. Digital immigrant instructors are speaking an outdated language, the language of the pre-digital age.
And they are struggling to teach a population that is speaking an entirely new, parallel, and much faster language.
From the perspective of the digital native student, the source highlights that school often feels, and I'm quoting here, as if we've brought in a population of heavily accented, unintelligible foreigners to lecture them.
Wow, that's a powerful image. The classroom environment forces them to revert to an unnatural, slower state of being.
There's another great quote from a high school student who complained, "Every time I go to school, I have to power down."
Power down. They feel intellectually slowed down, not challenged. Meanwhile, the immigrants grouse that students just don't read like they used to, or that they have no appreciation for traditional step-by-step instruction.
They often fail to appreciate the new skills. The rapid synthesis, the twitch speed, the ability to multitask and filter.
Skills that the natives have perfected through years and years of digital practice. So the curriculum is failing the student, not the other way around.
This is where we get to the solution side. The source argues that educators have to confront this divide head-on, and that means radically reconsidering both methodology and content.
Right. It's not enough to simply upload a PDF to an outdated learning platform and call it digital learning.
Exactly.
The necessary methodology shift requires teachers to learn to communicate in the native's language. That means faster, less step-by-step, more in parallel, and with mechanisms for that random access we talked about.
But how do you do that with legacy content?
That's the major challenge.
Yeah.
How do you teach core material like logical thinking, critical reading, and understanding historical context using this new methodology? You can't just abandon it.
And then there's the content shift, which the sources divide into two necessary types. First, we have that legacy content.
The traditional curriculum, the bedrock reading, writing, arithmetic, and understanding the foundational ideas of the past.
And the sources provocatively suggest that some parts of this legacy curriculum may become less important in the future.
Just as Latin, Greek, or Euclidean geometry eventually moved from being essential requirements to more specialized knowledge, things change.
But we also need to prioritize what they call future content.
This is the digital and technological knowledge, software engineering, robotics, genomics. But crucially, it must also include the ethics, the politics, and the sociology that go along with those technologies.
Which raises a difficult question. How many digital immigrant instructors are actually prepared to teach this complex, rapidly evolving new material?
A very small number, I would imagine.
The source provides a brilliant, compelling case study that illustrates the scale of the mind shift required to bridge this gap.
This is the CAD software example, right?
It is. It involves mechanical engineering professors trying to teach sophisticated computer-aided design, or CAD, software.
And this stuff is notoriously difficult. It typically has an extremely steep linear learning curve. You have to master hundreds of new buttons and options step by step. It's the definition of an immigrant-designed learning process.
So what did they do?
Their solution was truly revolutionary because it abandoned the immigrant mindset entirely. They scrapped the traditional lecture format, and they turned the entire learning process into an immersive video game. They created a first-person shooter called the Monkey Wrench Conspiracy.
Wait, a first-person shooter called the Monkey Wrench Conspiracy? That sounds incredible. I mean, that must have been a huge shift for those mechanical engineering professors.
A massive shift. They were used to delivering linear lectures and detailed problem sets. In the game, the learner became an intergalactic secret agent.
Okay, I'm hooked.
And the only way to defeat the evil Dr. Monkey Wrench and save the universe was to use the CAD software tools in real time to build necessary tools, fix broken weapons, and solve spatial puzzles under pressure.
So it wasn't about learning the tool for a test. It was about using the tool to win the game. The motivation is completely different.
Completely. The success was phenomenal, but the professors had to endure a large mind shift to achieve it. They had to abandon their traditional learning objectives language. They had to accept that students would learn randomly, not linearly.
They cut their instructional movies, which used to be 5 to 10 minutes long, down to under 30 seconds.
To match the natives' preference for speed and graphics. And crucially, they had to replace lengthy written instructions with fast-paced computer movies and inject a sense of speed and urgency into every interaction.
They even had to hire a Hollywood scriptwriter.
They did, to provide that dramatic narrative and urgency. The takeaway here is profound. The failure wasn't in the students' ability to grasp the complex software, but in the curriculum's antiquated pace and presentation.
So, what does this all mean for us? The conclusion to this educational section is stark.
It is. If we don't figure out how to translate legacy content like logic and critical thinking and embrace future content in the native language, we risk neglecting the education of the digital natives until they grow up and do it themselves.
And that intellectual gap, that's what's so dangerous.
It risks destabilizing our intellectual continuity. It's a very high-stakes cultural investment, ensuring that the core skills of logical thinking and critical analysis are successfully translated into a cognitive language built on parallel processing and instantaneity. If we don't, those core skills may simply atrophy.
And the next generation will inherit a world they are cognitively prepared to navigate?
But intellectually unprepared to govern.
Okay, if the educational crisis is fundamentally about the cognitive speed of information processing, the second crisis we're diving into is about the integrity of that information.
Right.
We're shifting from the classroom to the public square and the destabilization of societal trust due to deepfakes.
Deepfakes take these long-standing concerns we've had about disinformation and they elevate them into a new realm of realism and reach, as the sources describe it.
It's a whole new ballgame.
A whole new ballgame. Unlike earlier forms of misinformation, which were often obvious fakes or easily contextualized propaganda, deepfakes fundamentally blur the boundary between what is real and what is fabricated, and they often involve recognizable authoritative figures.
They're exponentially harder for the average person to detect. They're easier to believe because of their visual fidelity.
And they're far more damaging because they directly attack that epistemic uncertainty we defined earlier. They undermine the public's ability to discern the truth, which is, it's the foundational requirement for informed democratic participation.
You can't have a democracy without a shared set of facts.
You can't. The source material we're looking at focuses on a specific study investigating two main areas. First, how deepfakes weaken societal trust in U.S. governmental institutions by challenging authenticity and privacy.
And second, how effective are the policy efforts that are aimed at mitigation?
Exactly. The study used a randomized survey experiment. It had 104 participants, mostly California undergraduate students, and they were exposed to both real and AI-manipulated media.
And what stands out to me here is that the results weren't necessarily about who was fooled, but the deeper psychological impact on trust, even when they knew they were looking at a fabrication.
That is the crucial nuance that this research reveals. It's so important. The experiment showed that participants who were exposed to deepfakes reported a clear and measurable decrease in trust in public figures and U.S. governmental institutions.
So the effect is real.
It's real. Furthermore, the perceived realism of the deepfakes was modestly associated with this decreased trust. So the better the fake, the bigger the drop in trust. The technology is undeniably a threat to confidence.
But here is the central paradox, and for me, potentially the most terrifying finding for those concerned about democracy. We assume the fear is that deepfakes will fool us completely.
Right, that we won't be able to tell the difference.
But what did the study reveal about the participants' actual ability to spot the fabrication?
The crucial finding is that the overwhelming majority of participants could detect the deepfake. They were not deceived outright.
Wow, okay.
This means the core concern is not whether a deepfake is technically perfect, but that its mere existence taints the entire information environment.
So to reiterate our opening line, the deepfake wins not by fooling us in a single instance.
No.
But by making us universally suspicious of everything.
Precisely. And even when they knew the media was fake, they still expressed significant concern about the implications for privacy, authenticity, and democratic integrity.
So the anxiety is separate from the deception.
It operates independently of the technology's immediate realism. It points to what the source calls a deeper erosion of societal trust. If the public knows a system exists to manufacture perfect lies involving their leaders, then the credibility of every genuine video clip, every photo, every audio file is fundamentally undermined.
The poison is in the, well, not just in the cup of water you're drinking.
That's a perfect way to put it. If we can't trust our eyes or our ears, then trust in all the institutions that rely on verifiable facts, government, media, courts, science, it all erodes universally.
It creates a state of informational nihilism.
It does, a state where facts are just dismissed as manufactured reality, or worse, alternative facts.
In response to these existential threats, the study also looked closely at policy responses, noting a significant federal move recently with the bipartisan passing of the Take It Down Act on April 28, 2025.
The unanimous Senate passing of that federal act is very significant because it signals a willingness to regulate the platforms directly.
The big step.
A huge step. It makes it illegal to knowingly publish or threaten to publish non-consensual intimate images. But the real teeth of the law is that it requires internet companies and websites to remove the material within 48 hours of notice from a victim.
And this is a clear policy departure. Federal regulators are directly imposing requirements on internet companies, forcing them to take responsibility for content removal. It takes away that passive intermediary status they often relied on.
It does. But moving back to the public perception data from that California student survey, the results regarding policy effectiveness are complex. They reveal a significant dilemma for lawmakers.
How so?
The study used a 1 to 5 scale, with 3 being neutral, to assess policy perception across 3 key questions.
Okay, let's look at the numbers and the paradox they reveal. Question 12 asked if participants supported stronger regulations to address technologies like deepfakes.
And the mean score was 4.41.
Out of 5, that is incredibly high. It shows strong, unequivocal public support for robust regulatory measures. The public is demanding intervention.
They are. But watch what happens when you ask them about the solutions being proposed. When they gauged confidence in transparency-based solutions, specifically content labeling laws, that's question 11, the score was closer to neutral, around 3.25.
So they demand strong regulation, but they're skeptical that just slapping a label on manipulated content will be a sufficient fix.
Exactly. They see it as, well, the source calls it ambivalence toward transparency alone.
Yeah.
They don't really trust it to work.
And perhaps the most worrying data point, the one that defines the chasm, is question 13.
Which asked about trust in the government itself to enact effective AI legislation. And the mean score it plunged below neutral, landing around 2.8.
Wow. So that is a massive chasm. The public overwhelmingly wants stronger regulation, a huge 4.41 out of 5.
But they simultaneously show deep skepticism, 2.8 out of 5, that the government has the capacity or the knowledge or maybe the political will to actually deliver effective solutions.
This is the policy dilemma in a nutshell, isn't it? The public demands a fix, but they lack confidence in the proposed technical solutions like transparency, and they lack confidence in the government's ability to execute.
That's exactly right. The finding here is clear. This trust gap cannot be bridged by legislation alone, especially not passive legislation. It requires something deeper.
It requires a renewed cultural investment in truth and verification that has to be incorporated into the technology itself.
We need systems designed for integrity, not just for speed.
And that cultural investment in integrity means moving away from simply reacting to noise and instead building resilient, adaptive systems. So let's pivot now to the technical challenge created by the digital singularity.
Okay.
The critical problem of data saturation in AI.
Right. AI thrives on data, but there is a clear tipping point. The source material explains that data saturation occurs when the volume of data becomes so high and often so poorly curated or noisy that it generates processing bottlenecks.
It just overwhelms the system.
It overwhelms the system and ultimately degrades its ability to output accurate decisions.
This is more than just having big data. It's about too much noisy data overwhelming the system's capacity for quality assessment and verification. The system essentially gets cognitive overload.
And this risk is magnified exponentially in high-stakes environments. Think about an autonomous vehicle making a decision.
Financial trading algorithms.
Military targeting, or, directly related to our previous discussion, filtering disinformation on social platforms. Delayed or inaccurate decisions in these fields have severe, real-world consequences.
The challenge, then, is developing AI that can manage these dynamic, high-volume data streams without succumbing to this strain, and importantly, without relying on static, pre-programmed filtering methods.
Which is where the source material proposes this really elegant cross-domain solution. It's drawn from a completely different area, real-time navigation platforms.
It's a brilliant analogy because we use these systems daily and we trust them implicitly.
We do. Think about your daily commute using Waze or Google Maps. They are dealing with a constant, massive, and dynamic stream of data accidents, speed changes, user reports, road closures,
All happening in real time.
in real time. And yet they manage to filter that noise and deliver actionable real-time advice within seconds. How do they do that?
Okay, let's unpack the conceptual framework that makes this work. The source identifies 4 integrative mechanisms driving that success, which they argue should be applied to broader AI systems facing this information overload.
Right, mechanism 1, adaptive filtering. This is crucial. These systems continuously refine their data processing strategies through real-time feedback loops. They don't just apply a blanket rule.
So the system ensures that the information delivered is aligned exactly with the current context and the user's intent.
Precisely. If you're on a multi-hour highway journey, the system knows to filter out hyper-local neighborhood street closures that are irrelevant to you right now. It adapts its filtering strategy based on your specific goal and trajectory. It prevents unnecessary noise from even entering the decision-making loop.
Okay, what's mechanism 2?
Mechanism 2 is contextual relevance scoring. The algorithms constantly determine the importance and applicability of a piece of data based on the current situation.
Give me an example.
A report of a single stalled car on a busy highway at rush hour gets a massive relevance score. The same report at 3 a.m. gets a lower score, unless it's confirmed by multiple sources. The context changes the value of the data.
This mechanism is why Google Maps can integrate all this multimodal data so seamlessly, street view imagery, real-time traffic sensors, and assign a specific dynamic score to how much that data point matters right now to my trip.
It prioritizes timely, confirmed data, which leads us to mechanism 3, hybrid verification.
This sounds like the most important one for the crisis of deepfakes and trust.
It arguably is.
Yeah.
It's the constant cross-referencing of crowdsourced data, which is messy human input, like a user reporting a crash.
With sensor data, algorithmic hard verification like loop sensors or high-resolution GPS data.
This redundancy drastically improves accuracy, and most importantly, it builds user trust. And if you apply this to our political discourse,
You need systems that cross-reference crowdsourced reports of a viral video being fake with algorithmic checks for manipulated metadata, known deepfake generators, and temporal inconsistency.
it creates a firewall against that informational nihilism we were talking about.
Then the last one.
Mechanism 4 is temporal decay. This is essential in any fast-paced, high-volume environment. It's a built-in mechanism for automatically reducing the relevance and priority of old or stale data.
So the traffic jam from 30 minutes ago isn't weighted the same as one reported 30 seconds ago.
Exactly. Information that was critical half an hour ago is now less important unless it's actively re-verified by new incoming data.
And the beauty of this framework is that the navigation analogy isn't just a theory. We have empirical proof that it works.
Yes, the source cites a study demonstrating the tangible efficiency of this human algorithmic blend. Waze users reported traffic crashes an average of 2.2 minutes earlier than official state logs received the same information.
2 minutes is a lifetime in an emergency.
A lifetime. And furthermore, the location accuracy was incredibly precise within 6 feet. This proves that combining rapid human insight crowdsourced reporting with rigorous algorithmic verification is not just scalable, but demonstrably efficient and timely in critical situations.
The ultimate recommendation, then, is that these principles, timeliness, contextual relevance, and data integrity verified by hybrid methods, must be applied to broader, high-stakes AI applications.
Yes. Think about social media moderation, where platforms must filter billions of posts daily for manipulated content, or predictive maintenance in industrial settings, or even critical healthcare diagnostics.
It's about creating adaptive data management strategies that combine the strengths of rapid human input and rigorous algorithmic verification.
It's the only way forward. It's the only way to create systems that are, as the source says, scalable but also sustainable, trustworthy, and resilient. We cannot rely solely on either the digital immigrant's slow, meticulous verification or the digital native's hyperspeed. We have to design a functional bridge between them that prioritizes quality over sheer volume.
So let's bring this all together for you, the learner. The digital singularity, that unstoppable fundamental wave of digital technology, has created 3 massive intertwined challenges that really define the current era.
First, we have the cognitive and cultural divide. This is forcing educational systems that were built by digital immigrants to teach legacy content in a language parallel processing speed, random access, that they don't natively speak.
The curriculum is outdated, not the student.
That's the key takeaway. Then second, you have the political crisis, where the mere existence of deepfakes is sufficient to erode our collective epistemic certainty.
Regardless of whether we are personally deceived by any one piece of media.
Exactly. The speed of digital information enables the decay of verifiable truth. And third, we have the technical challenge of data saturation, which requires AI systems to move past static filters toward these adaptive hybrid verification models borrowed from real-time navigators like Waze.
And the common thread in all three areas is this desperate need for adaptive mechanisms.
Adaptive mechanisms that can handle rapid, parallel, and frequently noisy information streams. We have to stop trying to slow the flow of information and instead design smarter, more flexible filters.
The study on trust and deepfakes provides the sobering synthesis of the political problem. We're facing a broader erosion of informational certainty. The public is anxious. They demand robust regulatory action, that 4.41 out of 5.
But they're deeply skeptical that transparency alone, or the government itself at 2.8 out of 5, can actually fix the problem.
It confirms that this trust gap cannot be bridged by passive legislation or simple technical fixes alone.
We need something much bigger, a fundamental realignment.
Which brings us to the final powerful thought from the source material, which I think serves as our mic drop quote for the day.
Yes, it synthesizes the scope of the required solution perfectly. In a world where technology can blur lines of truth, safeguarding democratic trust will require not only well-crafted policy, but also a renewed cultural investment.
A cultural investment in how we teach, how we verify, and how we collaborate with technology. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into your sources. It's clear the time for incremental, slow change is long past.
Thank you for sharing such compelling and important material. This crisis demands integrated thinking across pedagogy, policy, and engineering. It's all connected.
Before we go, here is the final provocative thought for you to consider. If the next generation's brains are physically wired for speed, parallel processing, and instant gratification, a style we currently dismiss as disruptive, what new legacy content will future digital immigrants struggle to comprehend about today's rapidly evolving, game-based, and digitally networked world? What is the new old language we are teaching right now, whether it's linear thought, patience, or chronological narrative structure, that will soon be considered obsolete and unintelligible to the natives who follow? We'll leave you with that to mull over. We'll see you next time.